This seems to be a disease of diet, of a high-fat diet. If I were a woman with breasts and I wanted to decrease my chances of getting breast cancer, I would get the fat out of my diet. And that includes excessive amounts of vegetable oil. You need a little bit of vegetable oil, but you don't want to slather 2 cups of corn oil over your spaghetti for any reason. Men are not spared the ravages of a high-fat diet either, because when a man eats lots of animal fats, those fats are turned into male hormones called androgens. And androgens stimulate the prostate gland to get big. In our society, when a man reaches 60 or 70 and his prostate gland gets big, his doctor puts his arm around the patient and says, well, George, that's just part of getting old, your prostate gland's getting big. No, it's not. That's 70 years of running androgen through that prostate gland. No wonder that gland gets big, and prostate cancer is the #1 killer of men. And if you compare countries of the world versus how much fat is eaten and how much men die of prostate cancer, sorts out just the same way. The more fat that is eaten in a country, the more the men die of prostate cancer. And again, it's a very rare disease in Thailand, where people eat rice and vegetables and traditional foods. So, animal fats. They clog you up, they make you fat, and they increase your risk for a number of types of cancers. There's 3 good reasons not to eat animal fats, and as I said, there's absolutely no reason to eat them ever. Now, I'm describing problems with eating animal flesh. They have too much fat, and that includes chicken and fish. Fish has a tremendous amount of fat and cholesterol in it, and chicken flesh is very fatty food. If you ever watch your mother make chicken soup, you ever see all that fat that rises up to the top there? Don't kid yourself that chicken is lean meat. It is not. There's just as much fat and cholesterol in chicken as there is in beef. Animal muscle is animal muscle, and when you eat it, it raises the level of fat in your blood, and you do not need it. There's another problem with eating animal flesh. It has too much protein. Now, when I was in medical school, I never heard the words too much protein. I thought the more protein, the better. Put them on a high-protein diet, make them strong. Tain't so. You better believe there's such a thing called too much protein, and most North Americans suffer from it. First of all, what is protein? Protein is the building block material that you use to make the hard structures of your body. Your fingernails are made of protein, your hair is made of protein, your bones are made of protein. It's the brick of our bodies, a solid substance. Now, you don't need very much protein during the day. You only need about 30 grams of protein a day. That's the weight of 10 pennies, okay? Imagine 10 pennies in your hand, that's how much protein you need. But look how much protein the typical North American consumes. On a typical North American eating day, a typical American who has bacon and eggs for breakfast and a glass of milk, who has a cheeseburger and milkshake lunch, and has a beefsteak dinner with a glass of milk and some ice cream for dessert, is clipping along at 150 grams of protein. That is a 5-day supply of protein. That is too much protein. Why? Because your body can't store protein. You can store fat, you can store carbohydrates, you can't store protein. So what happens? Well, your liver starts breaking down that protein, and as it metabolizes it, it releases all sorts of toxic nitrogen-containing waste like urea and ammonia and amino acid fragments. And these have a detrimental effect on the body, because as all these amino acid wastes go through your kidneys, it makes you lose calcium out of your urine. Why does that happen? Because there's fundamental differences between animal protein and plant protein. And I'm talking about the protein in meats and dairy products. Animal proteins contains amino acids that have sulfur, and sulfur makes extra acid in the body. And as acids wash through the bone, they dissolve calcium out of the bones. Plants have much less acid. Animal protein is very concentrated. The muscle of an animal is the most concentrated protein on the planet, and so there's a big bolt of protein that goes into your bloodstream as soon as you eat it. Plant protein is mixed up with fiber. When you eat whole grain rice or whole grain barley, it takes hours for that to be absorbed into your bloodstream. The absorption time is much, much slower. So the less acid nature of plant protein and its slower absorption rate means it's much gentler in the body, and it doesn't pull calcium out of your body. That's a very significant phenomenon. The phenomenon of protein pulling calcium out of your body is appropriately called protein-induced hypercalciuria, too much calcium going out in the urine. What I'm saying is, and it's well documented, when you eat a big bolt of animal protein, whether it be red meat or chicken or fish or even milk, the acid nature of the protein washes through the bones, dissolves the calcium, which then goes out in the urine. And what I'm telling you is that every time you eat a piece of chicken, every time you eat a piece of fish, ladies, for the next 3 or 4 hours, you urinate calcium out of your body down the toilet. And the investigators who documented this many times clearly say that high-protein diets cause a negative calcium balance, even in the presence of more than adequate dietary calcium. Even if you are taking calcium tablets and drinking milk, protein is such a potent yanker-outer of calcium out of your body that you will not be able to keep up with the calcium loss. Does that ring a bell with anybody? It did with the investigators. They said that osteoporosis, thin, crumbly bones that fracture easily, would seem to be an inevitable outcome of continued consumption of a high-protein diet. In our society, we are told that the cause of osteoporosis is not chewing up enough calcium tablets or not drinking enough cow's milk. And you're really told to believe this. There's a lot of medical evidence that says this just is not so. And this was clearly shown, I feel, in a study that was released by Cornell University recently, done by Dr. Colin Campbell, where they investigated thousands of people in the Republic of China. And they found that in this country, essentially osteoporosis is unheard of. They don't get osteoporosis. And women make it into their 80s, having nursed 5 children, and they have nice, strong bones. And yet here is a country that consumes essentially no dairy products. The milk isn't available, the cows aren't available, the refrigeration isn't available. They get all their calcium out of grains and greens and fruits and vegetables, and they don't get osteoporosis because they are eating grains and vegetables, and it doesn't make them urinate out their calcium. But it's been clearly shown as the Chinese folks move to the cities, get more affluent, and start eating more meat in their diet, they start losing calcium, and then the osteoporosis appears. It's really becoming apparent that osteoporosis seems to be not so much a disease of calcium deficiency, it's a disease of protein excess. You see osteoporosis in the countries that consume the most protein. In the United States, in Scandinavia, in Europe, and in Australia. That's where you see osteoporosis. You don't see it in China, you don't see it in rural South America, you don't see it in rural Asia, where people are eating grains and vegetables. And I'll tell you, dairy products are no protection against osteoporosis because the Americans and the Canadians and the Scandinavians are the people who drink more milk and eat more cheese than anybody else on planet Earth, and they have the worst osteoporosis on the planet. And if dairy products protected you from osteoporosis, you wouldn't see it in North America, and you see just the opposite. Because there's so much protein in dairy products that it actually puts you in negative calcium balance, makes you urinate out your calcium, and Dr. Recker's study clearly showed this. They gave women 3 8-ounce glasses of milk a day for a year, and they were still in negative calcium balance because there's so much protein in milk. Don't rely on dairy products for your calcium. Get it out of grains and greens and fruits and vegetables, but most important, hold on to your calcium by getting all that chicken and fish flesh out of your kidneys and out of your body and out of your bones. There's been studies comparing the bone density of vegetarian women versus meat-eating women, and clearly the vegetarian ladies hold on to their calcium better than the meat-eating women because they're not eating all that protein. The third problem with the North American diet, outside of having too much fat and too much protein, is that it has very little fiber in it. Plant fiber are the starches and sugars in plant foods that are not absorbed out of the intestine into the bloodstream. They stay in the intestine. They pass through the intestine. These plant fibers draw water into the intestine. They make for a nice soft fecal material, makes for nice normal bowel function. And very importantly, when meat is eaten, and the meat gets down to the colon, the large intestine, the bacteria in the large intestine break down the meat proteins and the bile acids that the liver secretes to digest them, breaks these substances down into cancer-causing substances, into carcinogens called benzopyrene and nitrosamine. And you smear these cancer-causing substances on the inside of your colon for 50 years, 60 years. What do you think is going to set off in there? President Reagan found out the hard way, as 60,000 North Americans do every year. They opened up his colon and found a big fungating cancer of the colon. This is essentially a disease of meat-eating people. You very rarely see this in vegetarian people because they're not smearing all that meat protein on the inside of their colon. Another good reason to consider eliminating animal products from your diet. You will substantially lower your risk of cancer of the colon. Numerous studies have now shown that. Why does all this happen? Good heavens, what a set of catastrophes to fall on you just because you want a cheeseburger for lunch. That doesn't seem fair, does it? Well, to me it seems pretty logical, because our digestive system simply is not that of a mountain lion. We are not carnivores, no matter how you look at it. In fact, if you compare the digestive system of